Hey everybody, this is Dan with Pain Free You. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Robert from, I think he said Northwest England. Um, so welcome, Robert. Robert's volunteered to share his success story with the mind-body approach. So welcome, man. Good to meet you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for giving me the platform. I'm very grateful.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little story as to your journey with symptoms, whether it be pain or something else, what you gone through, when you found out about the whole mind body space, and
Yeah.
what you did to get yourself better.
Well, it's a very long story.
Well, we
I,
can do
I,
a condensed version of it.
I will definitely give you the short version.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, since started at school, primary school or elementary school,
Mhm.
um, I'd had food intolerances and kind of back and hip pain and other symptoms simmering in the background for many years. And all that really got worse after my dad died of ALS when I was 19. And at that point, I was at university. I got pretty bad hand and wrist pain. Also, doing a degree that I didn't exactly love. So that was another factor.
Okay.
And I got gingivitis as well. And the hangovers got much worse. I mean, I've never heard of anybody having such terrible hangovers as me. They went on for about 4 or 5 days. But it didn't get really bad until February 2019. And at that point, I just finished writing a novel, and my back hurt terribly getting out of a chair. The pain persisted for weeks. So I figured I need to do something. I went to an osteopath, and she thought I had ankylosing spondylitis.
Okay.
You know, I Googled around as people do, and looked at the symptoms and everything on Wikipedia and kind of agreed. And at that point, I diagnosed myself, which is not a good idea. Um, so, yeah, I mean, basically, I didn't go to a doctor at that point. I wasn't too thrilled about what they did with my dad. And they hadn't really sorted out any of my simmering health problems before that.
Right.
So, with autoimmune disease, mainstream medicine says, they're incurable and they just want to manage the inevitable decline with medications generally. And that wasn't really good enough for me. I mean, I wanted to fix this. I wanted to get better. So I looked around, and the main alternative that I could find was the autoimmune paleo diet, the functional medicine approach. And they the basic approach there is to kind of start it that it's the premise that autoimmune disease is caused by um, bacteria, basically. So the idea is you starve out the bad bacteria and thereby repair your leaky gut. We're using diets, very restrictive diets with very little carbohydrate.
Hmm.
So, they have success stories, and even if these people have to stick to a very strict diet and supplements regimen, they do have some of them have very few symptoms. So I chose the diet approach mainly because it was the only approach that actually held out hope for a recovery or, you know,
Right.
to mostly recover. And I started dropping all these different foods. So I started with lactose, dropped lactose, felt better. I thought, wow, this is it. And but it just kind of led to an unhealthy obsession with food, and I had to eliminate more and more foods over time. Each
Hmm.
time I eliminated food, I got some temporary symptom relief,
Sure.
but overall, I got worse, basically.
Yeah.
And I've got a full symptom list here. It's quite long. Is it okay if I read it out?
Um, yeah, I mean,
It's like a paragraph. It's not going to go on forever. Just
yeah,
to give people an idea of what I was dealing with, because
sure.
people,
Yeah,
I
try
don't.
not to get into descriptions as to
No, 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 no,
adjectives as far as,
no, 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 no. There'll be none of that.
sure.
No, I won't make it graphic. It's
Okay.
yeah. So severe chronic back and hip pain, chest pain, shortness of breath, anxiety, depression, gingivitis, insomnia, frequent urination, um, wisdom tooth related infections, gluten, lactose, starch, egg, soy, onion, nightshade, artificial sweetener, and citrus intolerance. So intolerant to almost everything, really.
Well,
Uh,
lots of foods, sure.
yeah, diarrhea and constipation, headaches, severe chronic fatigue, cold intolerance, massive foot swelling at one point, urinary pain, dizziness, wrist and hand pain, infected bug bites, hemorrhoids, and an anal fissure. So yeah, I mean, it's such a long list that I can't remember it off the top of my head. But yeah, my worst, it got to the point where I could only eat 1,000 calories a day of almond milk, mushrooms, and cucumber, and that went on for 4 months.
Wow.
So you know, I looked like a kind of like a prisoner of war. I had visible ribs. I was a mess, basically.
Yeah, sounds it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could hobble around my house, but at one point I had to go to a hospital for an ultrasound, and it was a massive hospital. So for that, on that occasion, I needed a wheelchair because to
Sure.
travel any kind of significant distance, you know, I there was a risk that I would just collapse with the disabling back and hip pain. So ultimately, yes, I did have to go and see a doctor, and 5 doctors thought I had autoimmune disease. Uh, Crohn's was the leading candidate, but celiac was also mentioned.
Sure.
One doctor said that I was the worst autoimmune patient he had ever seen,
Wow.
which is great to hear, you know. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of pointless tests going on.
Hmm.
My doctor talked about Gilbert syndrome, which didn't explain any of my symptoms. It's a benign liver condition. Eventually, I got referred to a gastroenterologist, and he wanted to do a gastroscopy and an X-ray to find out what was going on with the back pain.
Okay.
Both procedures were cancelled due to the lockdown, but you know, at that point, I was kind of glad because every time I saw a doctor, I got worse. They were talking around, bandying about these incurable diagnoses, and I mean, I can't blame the doctors because I never got officially diagnosed, and I kind of diagnosed myself
Right.
and gave myself a nocebo effect because I believe these provisional diagnoses.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, there was a definite nocebo effect, negative expectations leading to negative outcomes
Yep.
for sure.
Very common.
And so yeah, I mean, by that point, I wanted to go it alone. And you know, before all this, I was agnostic. But at this point, I was so desperate that I was willing to try anything. So I started to pray, and I promised Christ I would spread whatever message he wanted me to spread if I recovered.
Right.
And after that, that was kind of the turning point, really. After that, Amazon recommended me a book by John Sarno, Healing Back Pain.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I bought the book. The basic idea, as you know, is back pain. It's
Hmm.
psychosomatic, you know, and it's common amongst nice people and perfectionists. But yeah, I didn't read the book initially. I kind of left it on my nightstand for about 2 months.
Hmm.
Um, I thought that, well, I mean, this is just the excuses, I guess, really. I thought, you know, he's talking about bad backs, chronic pain. I've got autoimmune disease. It doesn't really apply. And but you know, ultimately, I was just couldn't handle the truth at that point. Really, I mean, they were just excuses. So the thing that really persuaded me to read the book was a dream I had where I was on a podcast and I was holding up one of Sarno's books, Healing Back Pain, but I've got one here, The
Sure.
Mind Body Prescription.
Yep.
And I was saying, you know, the diet approach is okay, but this is better. And um, I knew a little bit about dream analysis. I knew this, you know, the unconscious can communicate to consciousness through dreams, and so I figured, okay, well, let's give this Sarno stuff a try. And I read the book, and Sarno's basic thesis is that pain and fear of the pain are distractions from repressed emotions, and provided you accept pain as a distraction from the unconscious and resume normal activities, with most types of chronic pain, in all likelihood, you'll be fine. And the key determining factor he found was whether the patients accepted the diagnosis or rejected it. So only about 10 to 20% accepted the diagnosis, and almost all of them healed.
Right.
But it wasn't until I applied his theory to myself that I really started to make progress. So I mean, one morning I was just thinking about repressed emotions, repressed anger, particularly, and I got about 20% improvement in symptoms just from doing that. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. And then I went for a walk with my mum and walked much further and faster than I had done before. We went about 3.5 miles, and talked about repressed emotions, repressed anger, stuff from years ago. And the pain was there, but it wasn't that bad, and it was a dramatic improvement. So from that moment on, I knew the TMS approach was going to work. The cat was out of the bag, basically.
Nice.
And I got some gradual improvement from there. Every week I walked a bit further and ate a bit more. And then I got hit with symptom imperative, which Sarno describes very well.
Yeah.
It's basically like if you begin to make progress with his work, symptoms can shift to a different bodily system or just shift location.
Right.
To try and keep you distracted, I guess. And so for me, it was my feet that swelled up.
Okay.
Huge foot swelling, so bad that I struggled to get my shoes on. And so I kind of kept walking, but I was limping around because I had these giant feet. It was a bit of a nuisance. So eventually I started journaling, and I journaled about grief, because as I said, my dad died when I was 19 of ALS, and I repressed most of the grief. So I journaled about that in very blunt, dramatic terms. And my feet deflated almost instantaneously, almost back to normal level.
Wow.
I describe it as being like someone had stuck a pin in the whoopee cushion. It was pretty dramatic, and it all happened within about 10 minutes while I was journaling. So after that, I kind of had I kept gradually improving, and I say the recovery took about 15 months, because at that point there was no chronic symptoms, and the symptoms were relatively mild. But I did have some lingering symptoms after that.
Okay.
And I kept kind of journaling and later visualizing every day, and that had been very helpful, to be honest, for a year, for the 15 months. But yeah, I mean, eventually I just kind of had to say, well, look, I've gone over these same emotions hundreds and hundreds of times. It's
Right.
time to put a stop to this. And basically, I admit that I overdid it, and I gave up, and I did get some symptoms because of that, but I rode out the storm, and then that was pretty much it.
Nice.
So now I'm fully recovered. I can, my regular run now is 8.5 miles. I can lift weights, and I can eat anything humanly edible, anything I want anyway.
Wow. That's awesome.
So yeah, it's a complete recovery.
That's fantastic. So you made a comment that Sarno's contention was that the determining factor in whether or not somebody gets better is whether or not they're able to accept TMS as the cause, meaning the mind is creating symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important to make here, because there's a lot of people that say, Dan, I know about TMS. I don't understand why I'm not better yet. But when you really dig a little bit, they've got some lingering doubt. Well, it might be physical. I might have something wrong with my back, or I might have a gut intolerance or SIBO or leaky gut or any number of the things that they talk about with digestion, which means they haven't really accepted the mind-body aspect, the brain creating all this stuff. So I have a question for you with regard to all of this autoimmune stuff. Um, my my take on that is that when the brain is in fight or flight, really in a high alert state, both digestion, which you had, and the immune system are in a very much suppressed state because digestion and immunity is not essential if you're in a life-threatening, there's a tiger in front of me, it's going to eat me. So
Yeah.
if you're in chronic states of stress, which could happen as a result of the repressed emotions, could happen as a result of life stress, you name it, schooling, going to a major that you didn't really want to do, and the stress
Exactly.
of trying to do it. So I think the autoimmune stuff, it's really nice to hear somebody who came through a lot of autoimmune conditions through this work, because a lot of people are in the belief that you've got, which is, hey, they're not curable, but you've proven that they are. So with clarity and with teaching your brain that you're actually okay, your autoimmune issues have resolved, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I never got officially diagnosed. So, I mean, I'm a bit
The
of a mystery.
symptoms looked like
Oh,
autoimmune.
yeah, absolutely. Five doctors thought it was.
True.
But, I've since, I do a bit of mind body coaching, and I had a client who definitely had ankylosing spondylitis.
Okay.
For 20 years, he had the scans to prove it, he had the blood tests, he had inflammation,
Sure.
the works. I mean, he definitely had it. And after four consultations, he's basically recovered. I mean, he's got some mild flare-ups that go away in a few seconds. So, I mean, yeah, I'm convinced that autoimmune diseases can be healed. Um,
Yeah. So ankylosing spondylitis is one of those things where there is a structural thing that can be seen on an X-ray, MRI, right? Because there is some structural changes to
yeah,
the spine.
yeah,
But what Sarno says is those can be normal abnormalities. Just because you see it on the scan doesn't mean it's the cause of the pain.
yeah.
So, uh,
I think the same rule applies there,
yeah,
definitely.
that's evident based on your client's result, which is that
Yeah,
once they understood, okay, I don't need to hurt because this may not actually be causing the pain, they
yeah,
were able to get resolution. So that's fantastic.
yeah. Yeah. I do think the autoimmune thing, it kind of gets marginalized a bit in the TMS world, but yeah, there is some evidence, scientific evidence. I mean, we know stress causes inflammation. We know that adverse childhood events are
For
much
sure.
higher in autoimmune patients than in controls. There was a study Sarno cited from 1999, Smythe et al., I think. They got 50 some, 50 odd rheumatoid arthritis patients doing expressive writing, basically journaling,
Mhm.
and they found a 28% reduction in overall disease activity. And I don't think they did that many journaling sessions, to be honest.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, there is some evidence for this. It hasn't yet been completely proven, but, there's success stories out there. And
Sure.
that was enough for me. I mean, it's the Norman Cousins success story. He had AS as well. In healing back pain was really what convinced me that it could be done.
It's amazing what happens when the brain perceives there to be a solution as opposed to perceives there to be, you know, no solution. I'm sick, that's incurable, right? And I believe the body and the brain, its natural state is health. And a lot of times, you did a lot of Googling, researching, trying to figure things out, self-diagnosing, plus the doctors looking at you going, we don't know what's going on. Robert, what? Yeah, you're one of the worst, and all the nocebos which you picked up along the way, your brain
Yeah.
became more and more and more frightened as things snowballed and the symptoms, cascaded on top of each other. Um, but with accurate information and a decision, like an acceptance that this is what's going on with me, TMS, Sarno's right. Your brain was able to start to see some glimmers of hope and safety, and it started turning off what I call false alarms.
Yeah.
right?
exactly.
And the system returned to balance, which is evident by the fact that you're eating whatever you want. You can go for an 8.5 mile run. You're going to the gym. And this coming from a guy who was in a significant amount of distress physically.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do think there is definitely obviously a biological, neurological component to this. And as we know, the nervous system is closely connected to the immune system through the field of psychoneuroimmunology, quite
Right.
mouthful. But for me, anyway, I really attribute my recovery primarily to Christ and God, because I mean, I think that there is a spiritual component that gets somewhat overlooked. And for me, that this kind of deal I did with Christ, that I would, you know, tell my story, spread whatever message I needed to spread if I recovered, that came first, and then that led me to Sarno, which addressed the mind, and then the body improved. So for me, it was spirit, mind, and then body third. And yeah, I've written a book about my recovery, the mind solution. There it is.
Okay.
And
There you go.
I bring this up because Rebecca Tolan wrote a contribution to the book where she talks about her recovery. And it turns out that she made a similar prayer, and her prayer was, "Use me as a channel for healing in this world."
Nice.
You know, and then eventually, she found Shubina, retrained her brain, and
Right.
the rest. She's fully recovered.
Yeah, I've had her on as a success story on my channel as well.
Yeah, she wrote an excellent piece for this book, very articulate, and it's a great story. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to mention the spiritual aspect.
Oh, please. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Spirituality is one of those areas where um, I absolutely believe in spirit, in God, all of that. Um, but I've seen plenty of people who did not go down the spiritual path still get better.
oh yeah, it's not essential. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's wonderful that that was the start of your journey. And when you said, I heard about healing back pain, my first thought was that was God
yeah,
saying, here's the
yeah.
answer to your prayer. Here's what you need to start looking at. So I don't get into it because I don't want non-spiritual people to believe they cannot recover without the spiritual aspect. And what I've
Yeah.
often said is if you find that spirit gives you strength, belief, then by all means, wonderful. But if you're not a terribly spiritual person, don't convince yourself that you cannot get better. I think the
Yeah, I
concept
mean, yeah,
of work.
it's essential. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that point up. Um, so again, hold that book up again, The Mind Solution.
Point solution. Yeah. It's
Robert
got the point.
Ensor, Ensor, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's on
Uh,
Amazon, correct?
yeah, on Amazon. Yeah.
So
It's
if
got my
anybody's
full
interested
story.
in reading the book, um, yeah, it's great. So did Rebecca do the foreword for you, or did she write something else for you?
No, I've just, yeah, she wrote a contribution, basically a success story, which is fantastic. It's extremely well written.
Awesome.
And yeah, and you've also, there is going to be a foreword. Steve Ozanich wrote me the foreword, which was
Nice.
very generous of him. And it's an excellent foreword. I mean, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
it gets into the whole, the information cure, the understanding aspect of it in the foreword. And yeah, I mean, I did a lot of journaling, but I just want to kind of stress that it's not always necessary.
Right.
And most of Sarno's patients didn't need to go in for intensive psychotherapy or do a lot of journaling. I think most of them healed by just understanding the knowledge he gave them, accepting it, ignoring the pain and resuming normal activities. And I mean, I think that's why Sarno's books have such a healing effect. I mean, as I was reading Healing Back Pain, Mind Body Prescription, Divided Mind, I could feel myself getting better. I felt more comfortable.
Yeah.
I think a large part of that effect, magical effect, really, that they have, is that his message is that you don't necessarily have to do anything except, understand his concept
And
fully,
accept it. Yeah.
accept it, and believe in it, and understand it fully. Um, and the knowledge that you don't need to do anything, or you don't need to do that much to heal, is its own cure for some people, and it's because it's a very reassuring, simple, and liberating message.
Yeah.
If you think, oh, I need to go and do, 10 months of intensive psychotherapy or whatever, it kind of, the ego can keep shifting the goalposts by making you think, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. When if you're always seeking, you're never found. If you're always healing, you're never healed. So it can be a bit like having a carrot on the end of a stick that's always just out of reach.
Yeah.
And, I think that's something to be aware of.
Yeah. I think the knowledge acquisition, the knowledge, um, I call it knowledge therapy almost,
Yeah.
right? Because it's the accurate knowledge that brings down an important component, which is the fear, right?
Mm.
The knowledge is the antidote to the fear. And when the fear comes down, the brain doesn't perceive danger, and therefore it can stop the alarm systems. It can start turning off the alarms, which are the pain, the autoimmune, the sensitivities, and everything else. So I'm really all about knowledge. How does the system work? Then it's a matter of dialing down the fear with that accurate knowledge. And so in a lot of my videos, I'm talking about safety, reminding yourself you're safe because you have the accurate knowledge. So I have fundamentals to getting better. One is understanding what causes symptoms. It's the brain's perception of danger. In Sarno's case, the repressed emotions, but under my umbrella, repressed emotions were the danger that your brain was trying to distract or protect from. So it
Yeah.
still fits. And so the knowledge of how this system works, and then the acceptance that this applies to me. So my second fundamental absolutely matches Sarno's thought that, you know, it's a determining factor. You need to accept that this is what's going on. So
Fully.
brilliant
Yeah.
stuff, man. Brilliant stuff. Anything else you want to add for the audience?
Um, yeah, I mean, I know it's absolutely not essential to be spiritual or religious, but I just think for some people who are really stuck and have tried everything, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and stuck the way I was stuck, it isn't, and if you're open to that kind of thing, it is a good option to have.
Yeah.
This kind
Powerful.
of, I call it the divine bargain, because it is a kind of bargain. I mean, you're basically saying that you're going to do something that will help others when you're healed,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't really do that until you're healed because you're not in the right physical, psychological condition.
Sure.
So by doing that kind of structured prayer, it by transcending the self-interest of the ego, of the mind even,
Mm-hmm.
you tap into the power of the spirit, because the spirit is above material concerns,
Sure.
uh, completely. It's immaterial by definition. So I think you really have to, yeah, to really activate that, it helps to go beyond self-interest. Um, so yeah, I mean, for anyone who's really stuck and is open-minded to that kind of thing, that would be my top recommendation.
That's wonderful.
Um, and yeah, I mean, there is some evidence. I mean, me and Rebecca did this kind of thing. Steve Ozanich, who wrote the foreword, was sustained in his darkest hour by faith in God. He
Right.
wrote in Great Deception. So yeah, it's very very powerful stuff. And the other thing I'd like to say is that, as we've talked about, the key really is whether you fully accept the idea that it's psychosomatic, reversible, more or less benign condition.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think the main obstacle to fully believing in that you have TMS for many people is that they're too ashamed to admit there is a psychological problem, and this kind of holds them back from fully believing. And the reason for that, and I was one of those people for the 2 months where I left Sino on my nightstand.
Sure.
The reason for that is that desire for approval is a big part of a perfectionist personality. If you're trying to be perfect, it's to gain approval from others or to maintain your self-image as a high achieving individual.
Right. Sure.
So there's a lot of the this leads to repression of socially undesirable traits and feelings like anger, especially,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't go down well in a social situation. And I think yeah, I think to say the least, I think where I've kind of differ slightly from the classic perfectionist is that I've always had a very malleable, changeable personality. Yeah, so that enabled me to admit to the anger and some of the socially undesirable emotions, and yeah, I think that helped. But ultimately, whether you believe or not, I believe is determined by spiritual factors. So that's why I think this divine bargain is a good tool to have in the toolbox.
That's and
And yeah,
it also ensures that as you learn, as you heal, as you recover, you're now propagating the truth out into the world because you've now made a commitment to share and help others. So this is not going to come out of the medical school curriculum. This is going to come out of people getting
no,
well and sharing it. And so whether it be a divine bargain that you've made or just a holy cow, I'm thrilled I'm better. I can't wait to tell other people. Um, Word's getting out there because there's more and more coaches, there's more and more articles. I think Alan Gordon and Howard Schubner's Boulder back pain study was just on
yeah,
ABC Today, out on television just in the past couple of weeks. And so this is definitely like a grassroots, you know, the people are going to start spreading this word more and more. So that's wonderful that you're a part of that and committed and wrote that book. I'm actually in the middle of writing my book as well. So good for your getting that done out and putting it out there. That's awesome.
thanks. And your videos have reached a tremendous audience, and you're definitely a large part of this.
Yeah, I'm
And yeah,
very
I
blessed.
do think that ultimately, mind body medicine is going to be the dominant paradigm for chronic pain, chronic fatigue,
Absolutely.
IBS, fibromyalgia, these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the goalposts are going to have to shift. And I think the new frontier in science then will be looking at applying a TMS approach to autoimmune diseases and some of these more serious conditions, perhaps neurological conditions,
Right.
other than chronic pain. So yeah, that will be interesting
Yeah,
to
it's going
see.
to be a lot of fascinating stuff is happening already as this mind body approach really grows and matures and more people are getting involved in it. There's a doctor in Australia who wrote an article about pain and the mind body stuff, and that got published in a medical journal out there. And so, yeah, more and more medical doctors are starting to see this. Howard Schubner, he does trainings for practitioners, and little by little, he's letting people know about all this stuff. And I even have people who watch my videos who, when they go to the doctors, they're telling the doctor, the reason I'm doing so well is this. And the doctors are going, really? I've never seen that before. And, so it's growing. There's a lot of resistance at the mainstream medical level, but we'll get there. I'm very confident.
I mean, there's a pretty solid body of evidence already, and that's just they just keep adding to it. So
Yeah,
it's going to reach a tipping point fairly soon, or at least eventually,
sure.
and make its way into mainstream practice. So yeah,
I
and
mean,
yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
what I was going to say, I mean, just look at it this way. I mean, Rebecca, very successful. She's got lots of success stories. And that's what I figured out. I think I saw you with Rebecca, and that's why you look so familiar. Didn't you do a
Yeah,
success story with her?
I've been on a media blitz. I've
Okay,
been
so
a lot of
that
interviews.
before for anybody watching, before we got started, I hit record here. I was like, Robert, you look familiar. I don't, did we speak? And he was like, nope. And I was like, I could swear, but I saw him on Rebecca's success story. And so um, I knew you. I just hadn't spoken to you. So yeah, she's got a ton of success stories. You know, I've got 53 in the bank and probably another 10 scheduled. They're just rolling in. And it's not even that. It's just like daily, if you scroll through the YouTube and Facebook comments, there are people all around the globe just going, "Oh my goodness, this stuff works." So yeah, it's picking up momentum. I'm really thrilled to be a part of that. I'm thrilled you're a part of that. Um, it's going to take all of us to get the word out because there's enough resistance in the audience to saying, that's not me. I'm not crazy. This pain's real. Right.
Yeah,
So there's that resistance plus the fact that, well, my doctor didn't tell me about this, so it can't be. And
yeah,
so these stories and these types of videos are really going a long way to help raise awareness and truly actually help heal people, which is fascinating.
yeah. It's amazing. The information cure, just the information is so powerful itself. Um, yeah, and the other thing I want to talk about, as I was recovering, I developed my own kind of spin on the TMS head game, how to deal with the fear, basically.
Sure.
And I kind of personified the fear voice that says, "Oh, you know, this is structural, it's irreversible damage to the cartilage, and blah blah blah. Oh no, I better be careful and all this." I personified that as an archetype. I call it the deceiver archetype. And the deceiver, it basically is the inner voice in everyone's head that distracts us from the unconscious via pain, fear, other symptoms, even, you know, desire, even. And by personifying this pain and fear generating factor and othering it, um, made it easier for me to ignore because it's like there's this voice in my head, but it's not really me, and it's definitely not got my best interests at heart. And yeah, I mean, you gradually just realize that the fear voice isn't you, and it's talking BS, and that was very helpful to me. And
That's awesome.
the other thing is that basically, if you look at all different types of recovery story, belief really is the common denominator in all healing. Whatever method people use to heal, whether it's diets, medication, surgery, meditation, or journaling, they use belief because they believe in their method.
Mhm.
Yeah, and of course, not all methods are equal. I mean, non-TMS methods are usually have temporary effects, like my diet, for example. And because you're still looking for an external solution.
Well, yeah, because you're treating the symptom, not the cause.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not getting to the root cause, and yeah. So I think that really might help people realize just how important belief is. It
Mhm.
would make sense of it's the common thread. It makes sense of all this chaotic landscape of healing where this works for some people, it doesn't work for others. And then this thing, you know, the diet does work for some people, but not for others. And yet, you know, you can have people who have surgery and in the right shoulder, and then you know, next thing you know, the left shoulder hurts terribly, and they need surgery. Yeah, it's just left to right and back again. And so, yeah, I mean, that might help. And of course, belief is a mental phenomena. So the very existence of these placebo effects kind of adds credence to the
For sure.
TMS.
The expectation effect. Sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anything else,
Yeah.
man?
Um, well, the only other thing I would say is that a shift in all mind body healing, I think there has to be some kind of a shift of identity, even if it's just I have incurable chronic pain. I'm a chronic pain sufferer, and that's my identity. And that shifts to, I have TMS and it's curable.
Right.
Um, but for the people who do deep journaling or psychotherapy, it's kind of by integrating the unconscious, it's a broadening and loosening of the ego. It becomes less rigid. And, like in my example, and a lot of back pain sufferers, we're kind of rigid when we're in pain. And I think that's a symbolic thing. It's symbolic of a overly rigid, conscious attitude.
Right.
The ego is too rigid. It doesn't include a lot of things that have been rejected, a lot of uncomfortable emotions and what have you. So yeah, I mean, if you do the journaling and the psychotherapy, that's a broadening or a loosening of the ego to include previously rejected emotions and traits. And with the mindfulness, that is kind of a shift of identity because you're taking a step back from the ego and the pain, and it's like you're being a kind of awareness behind the pain and the
Mm.
fear thoughts. So the fear's there, but it's not me. The pain's there, but it's not me, kind of thing. And so yeah, being changeable to some extent is
Sure.
important because everybody in this field has had to admit they were very seriously wrong about something, even if it's just how they were healing, how they were approaching their healing.
Sure.
Because we all went down blind alleys before we found TMS. So this is really crucial. The ability to admit that you're wrong is absolutely pivotal, I would say.
Yeah, and that happens a lot even during the journey.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah,
We'll hit a speed bump, symptoms will change, they'll move, we'll go back into fear, and then, it might take 3 weeks of a flare up before we realize, holy cow, this is the same thing. I don't have to worry about it and get back on track. And we're always, you know, they're all learning opportunities. I don't like to think that we're making mistakes. I think we're being presented opportunities to learn something new through this journey. And if you can stay grounded with the foundation of the accurate knowledge that I'm actually okay. And my goal here is to reduce the fear and teach the brain I'm actually okay. That'll keep you on track. That's the direction I point people to through my work. And
yeah,
look, whether it's me, Rebecca Ozanich, Nicole Sachs, and all the other experts out there, yourself now included, we're all talking about generally the same thing.
yeah, yeah,
We all have our own ways of explaining it, but it's actually comforting to me to know that everybody else who's gone through the journey has come to the same conclusions that I've come to, which kind of gives me comfort. Like, okay, so we're all on the right track. This is all legitimate. It gives more legitimacy to the whole movement that, you know, we're all okay. The brain's just operating on what I say misinformation and fear. You get the right information, you dial down the fear, teach the brain that you're okay. The brain, ah, everything gets better. So that's brilliant, man.
yeah. And I do think that fear. I mean, what I found with fear as I was going through this long healing journey is that it's basically always a lie. I mean, obviously, if you're about to be attacked by a bear or something,
Yeah,
you'll have an instinctive response which is valid, and you should listen to that.
yeah,
But the kind of anxious fear that you get when there's nothing immediately dangerous going on, and that kind of fear voice, um, really is always a lie, and it's always it kind of masquerades as I'm trying to keep you safe, and if you don't listen to me, something terrible is going to happen.
sure.
But in reality, it's kind of creates the very thing that you dread the most. There's a great quote by Carl Jung, which is, um, "Where your fear is, there is your task." If there's if there's if there's a fear of falling, the only safety consists in jumping. This kind of thing, like you've got to go where the fear is trying to
Sure.
throw you off, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think that could be helpful because it's very easy to get caught up in that fear and that fear voice.
of course.
And, yeah, the other thing is with all these different approaches, the one common thread is that nobody in this field is going to encourage you to panic and freak out when you get a symptom.
Exactly.
It's all about basically reassuring you
Yeah,
and not panicking, not completely freaking out,
exactly.
whether
It's
that's
never
the
beneficial.
mindful stuff or the you know the classic Sano, it's a distraction idea. Just ignore it, get on, resume full activities. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's really not that. I don't see the differences as being that huge, to be honest. It's
No, they're
very
not. I mean, you know, the language we use to describe things, the techniques. Some people are very big on the journaling and trauma work. Other people are much more like me. I'm much more at the knowledge and safety approach.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're right. The acceptance that, you know, there is a cure. I'm on the right path. I don't have to fear this stuff. That's universal among, you know, all the folks teaching this stuff. So great stuff. I really appreciate it. Um,
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on and giving me this platform.
yeah, no
Really.
problem at all. Again, Robert's book is The Mind Solution, available on Amazon. Um, and if anybody's interested, go check it out. Um, so Robert, I appreciate your insights. I like the deceiver archetype, that those thoughts and those fears are not me. It's you. I think you called that.
And you kind of
You
disidentify from them, and then it's
you termed it. I'm
yeah, you
othering,
are the
meaning
that's it.
I'm saying that that fear voice is not me, and I'm putting that outside as something else other than me. And so that's really cool. I mean, I different language, same concept. I'm always talking about how your thoughts are not you. You don't have to
Oh, right. Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
have to believe them. I mean, you know, thoughts are just your brain trying to
Yeah,
keep it safe,
exactly.
but they're not factual. And so we
Yeah,
don't have to buy it. So we're saying the same things again, just proving
yeah,
the
very similar. Yeah. And you know, the book's called The Mind Solution, and there's kind of a double meaning to that because the mind is the problem, really. It manifests in the body, but you know, the problem starts in the mind.
Mhm.
And the mind can be a solution to the mind, of course.
Sure.
You know, the whole think psychological thing. You can become conscious of the repressed emotions and you know, dismiss the worries and everything and resume full activities, and that'll work. But the second meaning is that um, the mind is a problem to be solved.
Interesting.
So it can be part of the solution, but it's also the problem to be solved. I've recently discovered Eckhart Tolle's work, which is literally mind blowing. And this whole idea that the ego is really the root of all suffering, the thinking I that's a distinct, unique entity. Basically, yeah, the identity is the root of all suffering, and this really tallies with my experiences in with healing because, as I said, the identity is really crucial, and trying to having a very rigid identity and trying to maintain that rigid identity is what causes the repression. You know,
Yeah.
so anything that's inconsistent with that just has to get completely pushed out and buried. And so, yeah, I mean, to a large extent, the thinking mind is the problem. And if you find yourself overthinking it and trying to figure things out, I mean, the solution maybe could be to just try and stop thinking because that it really is part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, figuring things out, I always tell
I
people
mean,
that
you've got to figure out
nothing is.
initially, once you've got the whole basic information, constantly researching, Googling around, and looking for the next insight that's going to deliver you, it can't just be a hamster wheel to hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Robert, I appreciate you. This was very cool. Lots of insights shared. Awesome that you had like this laundry list of symptoms that you're fully recovered from. I hope that gives people a lot of hope and encouragement. I just talked to another gentleman a couple hours ago, success story, and he had a laundry list of over 40 symptoms. And that just goes to prove the concept that the more symptoms you have, the more likely it is the mind that's creating it, the brain creating all of this,
Yeah.
you know? There's no way we've got that many systems going
I
afoul
know, right?
all at the same time. So I love your success story. That's great that you're going out there and helping others, joining the team of people promoting this work, which is awesome. So unless you got anything else, we're going to wrap this up.
No. That's it. I've said my piece, and
That's
again,
wonderful.
thanks for giving me the platform. Really
Not a problem,
appreciate
man.
it.
Always glad to do that. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your story. And if you ever need anything, reach out. All right.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
All right. Take care.